Ever wish you could kind of, I don't know, like rig the system, pull some strings to get what you want?
Hmm. I think we've all been there.
Right. Like having this ultimate VIP connection who could make things happen, grant your wishes.
Yeah, that'd be pretty handy.
Well, today's deep dive, it's kind of exploring that idea, but instead of some shadowy figure, we're talking about, well, God.
Interesting. It's funny you should say that because what always fascinates me is this idea that we're not just like passively waiting around for God to act.
Oh, you mean we actually have a part in this whole thing?
Exactly. We can actively participate. It's not a one-way street.
Okay, so how does that work exactly? Because for this deep dive, we're looking at Open Heaven, that daily devotional.
Right. I've heard of it.
It's popular, for its practical guidance, all rooted in faith. And the October 11th entry, well, it really grabbed our attention. It tackles this whole idea of committing God to action.
Committing God. Now, that's a phrase that makes you stop and think.
Right. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't even sure what to make of it at first. Committing God, it's a pretty bold concept.
It is. And the devotional, it doesn't shy away from that boldness at all. See, it starts by acknowledging God's sovereignty.
Oh, right, right. God's sovereignty, that whole idea that God is in control, the ultimate decision maker,
Exactly. He's the one calling the shots.
like the CEO of the universe.
Exactly. But then, and here's where it gets really interesting, the devotional takes this turn. It suggests that even though God is the one in charge, we can actually influence his actions.
Wait, hold on. How does that even work? I mean, it seems kind of contradictory, doesn't it? How can we, with our limited, human understanding, how could we possibly influence a being of infinite power?
Well, think of it this way. Imagine you're hoping for a promotion at work. You could play all the office politics, try to force your way up the ladder.
Right.
But ultimately, the decision, it rests with someone else, someone with a much broader view of the company and what it needs, someone who sees the bigger picture.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
So the devotional, it draws this parallel to how God operates. It points to passages like Psalm 75.67 and 1 Samuel 2.78. Both of them highlight this idea that true promotion, it comes from God. He's the one who sees the grand scheme of things, the bigger picture.
So, are we saying that if we understand what's important to God, like humility, for example, as mentioned in 1 Peter 5.6, and we, I don't know, try to live that out, are we saying we increase our chances of being promoted? Is that what this committing God principle is all about?
It's not about manipulating God, not at all. It's more about understanding his heart, his character. The devotional seems to be suggesting that when we align ourselves with God's values and those values that are revealed through his word, that's when we tap into a power that goes beyond, our limited human capabilities.
Okay, so it's about alignment. Got it. But, and this is where it gets even more interesting to me, the devotional doesn't stop at just attitude, at just like having the right heart. It brings in this whole element of action, of diligence, as if those things are key ingredients in this whole equation.
Right. And it even quotes Proverbs 22.29, the verse that talks about how a person who excels in their work will stand before kings. It's about action.
So it's not enough to just think the right thoughts, have the right attitude. We have to actually do something.
That's what it seems to be saying. It's about putting in the work.
Okay, so it's like we have a part to play in this whole promotion process.
Exactly. It's not a passive waiting game. It's active participation.
So it's not enough to like wish for a promotion. We need to actually, embody those qualities, those things God values, like humility, hard work, and kind of let those things pave the way for us.
It's like we're walking a path, but God's already kind of lit it up for us.
Yeah, exactly. It's more of a, I don't know, collaboration, not manipulation.
Right. We do our part, and he does his. And that's what leads to those blessings, which might look like promotion or really any number of things that are in line with his will.
And speaking of things that might not be in line with his will, this is where Open Heaven takes that, well, kind of unexpected turn I mentioned earlier.
Who you mean?
It brings the devil into the picture.
Ah, yeah.
And I have to admit, when I first read this, I was a little thrown. What does the devil have to do with committing God and aligning with his plan? It didn't quite make sense to me at first.
Well, what the devotional is suggesting, and it's a pretty interesting take, is that even the devil understands this principle, this whole divine obligation thing.
Okay.
It's like he tempts us to sin because he knows. He knows it throws us off course. It disrupts that harmony we're working towards.
So it's like he's trying to trip us up, knowing that if we're not aligned, those blessings, that promotion we were talking about, it just becomes that much harder to attain.
Exactly. And it's not just that it's harder to attain. It's like God, being a God of order, of integrity, he has to honor the choices we make.
Even if those choices lead us away from his blessings.
Right. And the text even calls the devil the accuser of the brethren. It's in Revelation 12:10.
The accuser. What does that even mean?
It's like he's constantly watching for us to mess up, just waiting to point at us and say, see, look, they haven't held up their end of the bargain.
So then does that mean we're supposed to be walking on eggshells all the time? Living in fear of messing up?
That's a good question, and I don't think the devotional is advocating for a fear-based approach to faith at all.
Because that wouldn't be very encouraging, would it?
Right. Remember, the whole point of this, the message, it's hopeful, empowering even. It's about recognizing that we have a choice. We can choose the path that lines up with God's heart.
So it's less about being perfect and more about, I don't know, striving for progress, understanding that we're going to make mistakes along the way.
Exactly. It's about getting back up when we fall, realigning ourselves with God's will, and trusting in his grace and guidance.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. But how do we actually make this, I don't know, practical? The whole aligning with God's will thing, it sounds great on paper, but how does that actually play out in our lives?
Well, I think a good place to start is by shifting our perspective.
Mm.
Instead of seeing faith as like a transaction.
A transaction.
Yeah, like a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal. We need to see it more as a transformation.
So instead of treating God like, I don't know, a vending machine, we should be focusing on this transformation you're talking about.
Exactly. It's less about, okay, God, I did all the right things, now give me what I deserve, and more about coming to him with humility.
So more like, God, I trust you. I trust your plan. I want what you want for me, even if it's not exactly what I had in mind.
Now you're getting it. It's about aligning our desires with his, recognizing that his plans, they're way bigger, way more fulfilling than anything we could ever come up with on our own. And, the devotional, it focuses on promotion as this kind of metaphor.
But it could apply to other things too, right?
Absolutely. This principle, it applies to, well, pretty much every area of life, really.
Because God's involved in all of it. Our relationships, how we grow, our purpose, finding peace, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that God is already at work. Like he's orchestrating things behind the scenes, aligning events.
Yeah.
And we just need to, be aware of it, be sensitive to his leading.
Wow. This has been, I don't know about you, but I found this whole conversation really insightful. A lot to think about.
Me too. It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure.
So if there's one thing you want our listeners to take away from today's deep dive, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think the big takeaway here is that aligning ourselves with God's will, it's not about trying to earn his favor. It's more about, putting ourselves in a position to receive the blessings he already wants to give us.
It's like we're getting in the right lane, getting ready for those blessings to come pouring in.
Exactly. And those blessings, they're not because we've somehow earned them. It's because we're his children and he loves us. It's as simple as that.
Well said. And you know what? That segues perfectly into our final thought for our listeners to chew on. The text we talked about, it really focused on this idea of promotion.
Yeah, it really honed in on that, didn't it?
But I'm curious, how else could this whole idea of alignment, how could it apply to other things you're wanting, other prayers you're praying? What other areas of your life could benefit from, I don't know, getting God's perspective on things? His vision, it's something to think about, as you go about your day. And until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.